In 1942, Disney unveiled Bambi, a tale of innocence lost in the forest. But beneath its tender surface lies a harrowing origin. The story was born from Felix Salten's 1923 novel, written in the shadow of World War I, where death came without warning and survival meant confronting brutal reality. Bambi's mother wasn't just a character. She was a symbol of senseless violence, her sudden death shocking audiences into silence. Children wept, parents complained. But Walt Disney refused to soften the blow. He understood that true coming of age requires tragedy: the forest fire, the hunter's rifle, the blood on winter snow. These weren't accidents of storytelling. They were deliberate reflections of a world torn apart by war and loss. Salten himself was a Jewish Austrian writer who would soon flee the Nazi regime, his work banned and burned. Bambi's terror in the meadow, his desperate flight from unseen threats, mirrors the existential dread of an entire generation. What Disney marketed as a children's film was actually a meditation on mortality, the fragility of life, and the cold indifference of fate. The great prince of the forest tells Bambi that his mother cannot come back. There is no resurrection, no magical reversal, only the harsh truth that love ends, safety is illusion, and growing up means accepting that the world is far darker than any fawn could imagine. Bambi became a masterpiece not despite its darkness, but because of it. Moana was not always the brave hero we celebrate today. In the earliest Polynesian legends that inspired her tale, the ocean was not a benevolent guide, but a hungry, sentient force that demanded sacrifice. Young Moana's ancestors believed that to appease the waters, one soul must be offered each generation. When the islands began to die, the elders whispered that the ocean had chosen her, the chief's daughter, as its next tribute. Her journey was never about restoring the heart of Te Fiti. It was about escaping a prophecy that marked her for drowning. Maui, the demigod, was not her mentor but her hunter, cursed to deliver chosen souls to the depths or lose his powers forever. The heart she sought was not stolen treasure, but the calcified remains of the last girl who tried to flee her fate. When Moana finally faced Teka, she was not confronting a lava demon. She was staring at her own future, the rage of every sacrifice that came before. The ocean did not choose Moana to save her people. It chose her to join the others in an eternal, silent scream beneath the waves. But Moana refused to drown. In defiance, she shattered the cycle, though the ocean has never forgiven her, and still it calls her name in the tide. Long before Arthur became the legendary king, the sword Excalibur was born in darkness. Forged by the Lady of the Lake in the depths of Avalon, it was meant to bind a tyrant's soul. When the warlord Uther Pendragon seized it through betrayal and blood, the blade became cursed with his ambition. On the night of his death, Merlin drove the sword into an ancient stone that fed on human despair, creating a lock no ordinary man could break. For years, the sword waited, whispering promises of power to those who touched it, watching them age and crumble as the stone drained their life force. Only a heart untainted by the sword's dark history could break the curse. When young Arthur, an orphan who knew nothing of his bloodline, grasped the hilt with innocent hands, the stone shattered. But Excalibur's darkness did not vanish. It merely found a new vessel. The boy who pulled the sword became king, but the blade's hunger for conquest would shadow every choice he made, every battle he fought, until Camelot itself burned under the weight of its corrupted legacy. Some legends are not born from light. They are forged in shadow. In a nursery where toys came alive after dark, there stood a regiment of tin soldiers, each identical except for one. The last soldier cast from the mold had only a single leg, yet he stood as proud and steadfast as his brothers. Among the toys, he glimpsed a paper ballerina dancing before a castle. One leg raised so high he believed she too had only one leg, making her his perfect match. But the soldier's affection drew the jealousy of a sinister jack-in-the-box, a goblin who hissed warnings into the tin soldier's ear. When morning came, the soldier fell from the windowsill, tumbling 3 stories down into the gutter. 2 street boys found him, placed him in a paper boat, and sent him sailing through storm drains into the dark sewers where a massive rat demanded his toll. The boat dissolved, plunging the soldier into the river where he was swallowed whole by a fish. By cruel fate or dark magic, that very fish was caught, sold, and brought to the same kitchen of the same house. When the cook cut open the fish, there lay the tin soldier, returned to the nursery. But his journey had marked him with rust and shadow. The goblin's curse was not finished. A sudden wind, or perhaps the goblin's final trick, swept the paper ballerina into the fireplace. The tin soldier, watching his beloved burn, felt himself lifted by unseen hands and thrown into the same flames. In the morning, the maid found among the ashes a small tin heart and a scorched sequin, all that remained of a love that burned too bright for this world. In the 100-acre wood, darkness stirs beneath the honey jars. What if I told you that Winnie the Pooh, that lovable bear with a simple mind and insatiable hunger, hides a far more sinister truth? Created during World War I, author A. Milne drew from the trenches of horror he witnessed. Pooh's obsessive need for honey mirrors the desperation of addiction, a coping mechanism for trauma. His friends, each trapped in their own psychological prisons. Piglet, paralyzed by anxiety. Eeyore, drowning in clinical depression. Rabbit, consumed by control and rage. Owl, spreading misinformation with blind confidence. And Tigger, manic and unable to sit still. Christopher Robin, the only human, represents dissociation from reality, escaping into a fantasy world where his damaged toys become his only companions. The 100-acre wood is not a paradise. It is an asylum of broken minds, each character a manifestation of mental illness born from war and childhood trauma. Pooh himself, vacant-eyed and forever hungry, wanders endlessly searching for something sweet to fill the void where his memories should be. The Disney version painted over the cracks, but the shadows remain. In the original tales, there is no healing, no resolution, only an eternal cycle of need and emptiness in a forest where the sun barely penetrates the canopy. This is the dark origin of Winnie the Pooh, where innocence died long before the first page was ever written. In the shadowed reeds of a forgotten pond, a mother duck watched in horror as her final egg cracked open. What emerged was no downy yellow chick, but something gray and misshapen, a creature that made her feathers stand on end. The other ducklings recoiled immediately, their innocent eyes filled with instinctive cruelty. From his first breath, the ugly duckling knew only rejection. His siblings pecked at him relentlessly, drawing blood from his tender skin. His own mother turned away when he sought warmth, pretending he did not exist. The farmyard became a theater of torment. Chickens mocked his appearance, geese chased him into thorns, and even the farm girl who fed the others kicked him aside like refuse. Winter came early and merciless. Alone in the frozen marsh, the ugly duckling nearly perished a dozen times. Ice encased his feet. Hunger gnawed at his hollow bones. He became a ghost of himself, more shadow than bird, surviving on scraps and the faint, foolish hope that somewhere he might belong. But the cruelest blow came when he saw his reflection in a thawed spring pool. He had transformed into a creature of impossible beauty, a swan with feathers like moonlight. Yet as other swans glided toward him with acceptance, he felt nothing. The scars of rejection had carved something permanent into his soul. He was beautiful now, yes, but the ugly duckling inside would never die. He would always remember what it meant to be unwanted. And in the darkness behind his elegant eyes, that memory would forever whisper, "Beauty is just another mask, and beneath it, we are all still monsters waiting to be cast out." Long before Disney softened its edges, the Black Cauldron emerged from a tale drenched in genuine darkness. Based on Lloyd Alexander's Chronicles of Prydain, which itself drew from Welsh mythology's most violent legends, this story was never meant for children. The original Mabinogion texts spoke of Aran, the Death Lord, whose cauldron could resurrect the dead as mindless soldiers, forever bound to his will. Disney's 1985 adaptation attempted something unprecedented, to bring true horror into the Magic Kingdom. Taran, the assistant pig keeper, wasn't a chosen hero, but a reckless boy whose pride nearly doomed his world. The Horned King, a lich of unspeakable power, sought the cauldron not for conquest but for an army of the undead, the Cauldron-born, corpses animated by dark magic. The film's climax featured a sequence so disturbing that Disney cut nearly 12 minutes before release. Gurgi's sacrifice, throwing himself into the cauldron to stop its evil, remained, showing a death scene unlike anything Disney had dared before. The cauldron itself consumed the Horned King in a vortex of supernatural fury, his flesh ripping from bone as he screamed. This wasn't a villain's defeat. This was damnation visualized. The Black Cauldron became Disney's first PG-rated animated feature and its biggest box office failure, earning back barely a third of its budget. Audiences weren't ready for Disney to show them what true fairy tale darkness looked like. The film was buried in the vault for decades, a reminder that some magic is too dangerous, even for the Mouse House. But the cauldron's legend endures, whispering that beneath every Disney story lies a shadow far deeper than we're allowed to see. In the shadowed village of Sleepy Hollow, where autumn mist clings to twisted trees and superstition rules the night, there lived a lanky schoolmaster named Ichabod Crane. With his gaunt frame and voracious appetite, he wandered through life seeking comfort in food and fortune, his eyes forever fixed on the wealthy Katrina Van Tassel. But Sleepy Hollow harbored darker secrets than Ichabod's greedy heart could comprehend. The villagers whispered of a Hessian soldier, beheaded by a cannonball during the Revolutionary War, who now rode through the darkness searching for his missing head. Ichabod dismissed these tales as peasant foolishness, yet something in the October air made even his rationalist mind tremble. On one fateful autumn evening, after a harvest party at the Van Tassel estate, Ichabod rode home alone through the haunted woods. The trees seemed to reach for him with skeletal branches, and every shadow promised something sinister. Then he heard it, the thundering of hooves behind him, growing closer, closer. He dared to look back and saw the nightmare made flesh, a headless rider atop a massive black steed, carrying a flaming jack-o'-lantern where his head should be. Terror seized Ichabod as he spurred his borrowed horse into a desperate gallop, racing toward the church bridge that folklore claimed the ghostly rider could not cross. But fate is cruel to the greedy and cowardly. As Ichabod neared salvation, the headless horseman hurled the burning pumpkin with supernatural force. It struck true, and Ichabod Crane vanished into the darkness forever. By morning, only his hat and a shattered pumpkin remained. Some say Ichabod fled in terror to start anew in another town. Others know the truth. Sleepy Hollow keeps its secrets, and the headless horseman claims all who dare ride through his domain. The schoolmaster's greed led him to chase the wrong prize, and the hollow swallowed him whole, leaving only whispers and warnings for those who would follow.